Today I am canning chicken. And I want to try out canning some chicken with seasonings already in place. So I found online a canning recipe for spices. And the reason that's important is because when you can, especially when you pressure can, it infuses the flavors and intensifies them. So you don't want to go overboard with your flavors because you will have something that's inedible. So I'm not going to do all of the chicken with flavors, but I wanted to try a couple out. So we have an Asian spice blend, which is curry, garlic, onion, ground ginger, sea salt, and pepper. So that's what this is. I've already made that up. I'm just going to do a couple jars in that and see if we like it. And if we do, then this will go in the recipe book. And if we don't, then this will go in file 13. But what I'm going to make right now is a poultry seasoning blend. And I am converting because this recipe blend here, this is from Canning Diva, and it says to use chopped fresh items, which I don't have. So the conversion to that is 1 teaspoon of dehydrated to 1 tablespoon of fresh. So what we're gonna do is get rid of this tablespoon because we don't need that. And I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of thyme. Now I dehydrated this myself from fresh that I got from the local farmer. So we need 2 of these, 2 teaspoons. And then 1 of rosemary. Again, this is from the local farm. And then we need 1 of the fresh sage, which I don't have fresh sage, but I do have organic sage that I purchased from Walmart. And it's rubbed sage. I'm not sure if it's stronger or not. I'm gonna take a chance on it. And then it calls for 1 teaspoon of dried marjoram. So we already have our teaspoon out, and so that's gonna be 1 teaspoon. This is also not something that I dehydrated myself, but we use what we have, right? Now we need 1/2 a teaspoon of celery seeds. And 1/2 a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And I do have fresh nutmeg that I could grind myself, but for the purposes of canning, I don't think that it's going to be necessary. Let's save it for like pies and stuff. Plus I want to use this up. Had it in the cabinet a while. It's 1/2 a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Looks like I have about 1/2 a teaspoon left. So if we like this recipe, then I'll make it again and this will be gone. And then, oops. I never use these lids anyway, so I don't know why I'm worried about it. And then 1/2 a teaspoon of ground black pepper, which I had this lid off earlier and it was not this hard to get off. Of course, because I'm on camera, I guess. Okay, so that is the poultry seasoning blend. And it says it makes approximately 1/3 cup. I'm thinking if you chopped I guess it would be more if this was all chopped up. So it says to use in pint-sized jars 2.5 teaspoons to every pint. So for this, I'm going to remember to use 2.5 teaspoons because this was all ground and followed the recipe exactly. And for this one, we did some changing. So this is supposed to be 1/3 cup, and this looks more like 1/4 cup to me. So probably just do maybe 1.5 teaspoons of this. You just don't want to overdo it with canning, especially pressure canning for flavor. And it'll add enough flavor. I'd rather have too little flavor than too much flavor. So we're just gonna go with that for now. And the next step would be cutting up the chicken. And I'm going to start cutting up this chicken. And it'll go in this bowl. And you want to cut the chicken in about 1-inch pieces. This is according to the food safety standards. And since this is going to be recipe chicken, it's important to, probably shred as it comes out of the jars, especially because my pint jars are not wide mouth. So one thing I learned from watching videos and then doing some research is that raw chicken without bones actually cans longer than chicken with bone, raw chicken with bones, because the density of the chicken, I guess. So we're just gonna make sure I follow the rules and get them into about 1-inch pieces, I think. And they're gonna cook in the jar, so it's not necessarily important to cook them. They look prettier in the jar if you cook them first, but that's a lot of extra work, and the point of me doing this is to make life easier. And so I'm just gonna keep cutting up this chicken. I have about 25 pounds of chicken here. I don't know how many jars that'll actually do, but I'm gonna put it all up in my canner will hold 19 pints. So if we have more chicken then we'll go in 19 pints, then I'll just freeze the rest. Probably marinate it and freeze it, or I may use some of those herbs to marinate it with, and it's just so we can try it and see. But I'm only going to do a couple jars with the spices in it, since if for some reason we don't like it, we won't have a lot to try and go through. And if we do like it, I can always, just write that down on my notes, and then the next time I can chicken, I can make sure that I make a bunch more of it. But for right now, we're just going to do a couple jars of each, and then put the rest of the spices in the cabinet. So I found by doing beans actually that there are some flavors I just don't like them after they're canned, and one of those is cumin. It just changes flavor in the jar, and I made some taco meat. I made some beans, black beans, and I put cumin in them, and I just did not like the flavor. I don't know if I put too much or it just wasn't good. So next time I can black beans, I'll probably try again with just one jar and just tweak the recipe until I'm sure that I just either don't like it or the recipe is just not meant to be for me with the cumin. Because this is how you live and learn, right? So I'm going to keep cutting this up, and I'll bring you back when I fill the jars. I'm back before finishing the chicken because I have 2 more packs left, and they're about 6. There's about 13 pounds of meat here. So I want to see how the 2 packs, which should be about 13 pounds, how they fit in the jars that I've already gotten sterilized. So I want to make sure that I'm not over cutting, because once I get 19 of these jars full, I don't want to cut up any more, because I'll preserve that in a different way. So I'm going to do 2 jars with our seasoning mix that we made. This is a 1/2 tablespoon, which is 1.5 teaspoons, which is what I want to use for this one. We're going to do 2 of this poultry seasoning blend. Actually, let's see, do I have enough for 3? Look at me lying already. Okay, 4. Actually, we're going to do 4 just so I can use it up. It's herbs, so I can't imagine it being that horrible, and there's no cumin in there that I know. I know I like all these herbs, so I think that'll be okay. Now on this one, this curry, I'm only going to do a couple of these. This is 1 this is a 1/2 tablespoon, so that's 1.5 teaspoons, 1.5 teaspoons, and then so we're doing 2.5 teaspoons of this mix. Now I've got quite a bit of this left, so I'm going to save it for later, because I do not want very many jars of that, since I'm not really sure how that flavor profile is going to end up canned. Now I'm going to fill these jars up. This is a dozen jars, and see where we're at with chicken. So let me take it out of here so you can kind of see. And let me check my recipe, because I think I forgot. Oh yeah, it doesn't call for salt in these, and I like to put salt in my canned meat because it brings out the flavor in the meat. So I will be adding a 1/2 teaspoon of salt to the jars that have the herbs. I will not to the curry, because it does already have salt in the canning recipe, the seasoning recipe. So we fill these to 1 inch head space, which is that ring at the bottom. And roughly a pint is about a pound of meat when you cold pack it. So I'm not really packing this in there, but I am filling it in. You don't want a whole lot of space, because it will float. But if you pack it tight, super tight, it can't get the USDA says not to like cram it in there, because it would be too dense, and so then the pressure, it doesn't pressure can the way that it should. So I don't know the science about it, but I do know you're not supposed to like just pack it in there where there's no space at all, but you can lightly pack it in until there's 1 inch head space. They call it head space. So I'm going to go with that. This one I think can fit another piece. That one's full. So I'm going to have 6 flavored or pre-seasoned, And then the rest, I'm just gonna fill it with water. And you can cold pack without any liquid because the juice will come out of the chicken. So I'm gonna recheck my recipe actually on that before I say that I'm gonna do that. These 4 jars need salt. So don't take me on my word on what I just said, because I will definitely double check before I cook this, how long I need to cook it and how I need to prep it. But I do know for now, you put your seasoning in, you put your meat in, and I'm not sure if you dry can these or not, is what I'm getting at. So I'll have to look and see. So these 2 jars already have a reasonable amount of salt in them with that seasoning mix, so I'm not going to add any salt to these. I don't want my meat to be too salty, and it can be salted after the fact. But it just, to me, seems like it doesn't have a whole lot of flavor if you don't put some salt in it when you're canning it. I don't know. Okay, so that's 6. And then these will get salt, so I'm going to put them here. And I'll clean the rims of these jars with vinegar and a rag, just so I know that there no grease or not grease, but like fat or any particles on the rim that would keep the lid from sealing. That's basically why you do that. And I'm gonna put another one in here. And maybe a small one. Yeah. And so it looks like we might have, for 12/13 pounds of meat, who knows how accurate that really is on these packages. Looks like we might get a dozen jars, so that's a good way to know. So I might just need to cut up one more package, and then the last package I can just marinate the meat and freeze it, which we like to do for camping, especially because we can just open it, put it on the counter, go hiking, come home, or come back to the camper and throw it on the grill. It's already seasoned and ready to go. Or plain. I like seasoning, so I like flavorful things. So yeah, it looks like I'm gonna get about 12 jars here, which is good news. They call this, I'm not sure who coined the phrase. There's a lady on Facebook that on YouTube that uses the phrase all the time. I don't know if she coined it or not, so I apologize if I'm kind of stealing it, but I think it's kind of funny. She calls it ugly chicken because when you cold pack, it comes out just ugly. Whereas if it's cooked first, it isn't so ugly. I still have a little bit of chicken left here, so I'm gonna go ahead and get another jar because I know I have room in my canner for at least 19 jars. And I do have 2 canners, so I could do more, but I'm not going to. So we'll at least fill this one up. I'm gonna go ahead and put salt in these and get the lids on them before I do any more chicken, just so I can get these back in the fridge. So this is just extra fine Himalayan sea salt. It's pretty, but I probably won't buy it again. I found a deal. It's super fine, which is good for baking really, but I'm gonna go ahead and use it in these jars just because I have so much of it. I'm trying to use it up. This is 1/4 of a teaspoon because my half is dirty, so we're gonna put 2 of these in. Just to give us a little extra flavor. Now, you don't want to use pickling salt, or I guess you do want to use pickling salt or something like that. They say don't use iodized salt, in other words. It can cause, and if you use the salt, if you don't use like a pure salt, they put anti-caking agents in it. I don't know if you can see, but this is pretty stuck together. It doesn't have any anti-caking in it for sure. But anti-caking agents will just turn the jar cloudy, but this is ugly chicken anyway, so I don't know I don't think there's that much of a difference. I'm hoping I'm only putting 2 in each one of these while I'm talking. I'm not really paying attention. I'm gonna go ahead and do this one too, just so it's done. And I'm gonna clean my half so I don't lose count again. That's important. We'll leave the salt out. And I'm gonna check my recipe before I put the lids on just to make sure I don't need water or broth in these, and I will be right back. Okay, so I looked it up, and you use no liquid when you can raw packed chicken. And I did 1-inch pieces here, but you can do 2-inch pieces, which I didn't realize. So these are kind of small, and I could have done bigger chunks, but that's okay. So since we don't raw pack it, or I'm sorry, since we're raw packing and we don't have to add water, then I don't have to debubble. So I'm just going to make sure this is vinegar, which I put in the canner. It keeps the hard water from leaving white foam or frost on the glasses. And I will just go ahead and put this in the canner. It kind of reminds me to do that, but also it's just better to wipe the rims with that, so you know good and well the rims are nice and clean. And I've already washed my rims, they're here. And I did hear from a lot of people, they still heat their lids, and you don't have to do that anymore with the newer lids. I guess there's no harm in doing it, but it's just an extra step, another dish I have to clean. So I wash them. If they're straight out of the, even straight out of the box, I just wash them because yuck, I don't know how they were processed. So I just wash them, and I put them here in this little bowl to kind of dry. And then your rings, they can be reused a gazillion times, but you want to do finger tight. So I did that like that, but I'll show you again. Hopefully you can see this. Finger tight like that, and then a little bit, you don't wrench them on. Just turn a little bit. I'm not sure how much of this you can see. Here, I'll keep doing it. So these are all ready for the canner. And so I go backwards first. It makes it sit on there, and then you can tighten it like that. And then the thing is, if you get it too loose, it won't seal. And if you get it too tight, it won't seal. So like my biggest problem when I first started was, what exactly is finger tight? I don't know. It kind of, like I don't know what to do. But you kind of get the hang of it. I watched a lot of videos and kept trying, and I had a handful of things that failed or didn't seal properly, but for the most part I haven't had too many issues, so I'm just gonna keep doing it the way I was. Now he's working on the porch. This is a jar I still have to do, but this I have 12 jars now ready to go. I'm gonna go stick these in the fridge so they'll stay cold, and I'm gonna cut up one more package, which should probably fill up the last 7 jars and then the rest of it will just go in the freezer. So I got one more in these, turned out to be 6.5 jars, and this was 6.39 pounds of chicken. I just washed my hands and now look at me. But I'm gonna have to use this, I'll throw this rag in the dirty clothes. So I'm just going to wipe the rims because I already put the salt in there. I like the salt on the bottom because that way when it starts to juice up, it'll maybe go around the whole thing. Not really sure. It'd be kind of cool to have like a camera inside of the canner where you can see how it changes stuff. Neat. Somebody invent that. All right, lids. I'm gonna wash this out and I'll use it to carry these out to the canner. I like to clean up my mess before I start something else because once everything goes in the canner, there's really no mess. And I like to babysit it, so I don't like to be busy doing a lot of other stuff. I usually like to just sit on the porch and, you know, work or do something like that so that I know for a fact that it's being watched. I'm very forgetful, as you know, so I don't want to walk off and forget my canner. That would be awful, a waste of money and time. So I'm just going to put these in here. Just to carry them. And then I got my vinegar here. I don't want to forget that. And I need 1 gallon of cold water in the canner. Every canner's different, but my American, it takes 2 to 3 inches of water, and 3 inches is about the length of my finger. So I stick my finger down there and I know that it's that, but I've measured it before and it's about a gallon. Okay, so here we are on the canning porch. And first thing I need to do, take the lid off my canner. And I just canned in this the other day. So I don't need to oil this, but normally you would put oil around here to keep it from sticking or getting tight, but since I just did it a couple days ago, it's still on there. So now we just put the jars in the canner. So I want to bring you over and show you inside the canner. There's one of these, and it holds the jars off the bottom. You have to have that in there. And then we want to put our water 2 to 3 inches, it says. And we already measured, so we know. But what I want to show you is, I'm going to go ahead and pour the rest of the water in, but then this will go on and we'll do the next layer before we put the lid on. So this is my other ½ gallon of water that we need to make sure that this is properly filled. And then I want to add my vinegar. And then my next step, the rest of my jars. Now we have a full canner, which is always a happy day. Seal the lid, and with this version, you clamp down opposite sides. This steaming, heat all that water up. And once we do that, I'll add this to it, and then we're canning. I want a steady stream of steam coming out. You see there's a little bit of steam and some water spitting out, so that's good because it means that I'm getting pressure to inside the jar, or inside the canner rather. And what will happen is now I will set a timer for 10 minutes and let this steam build up. It'll get more and more solid and steady, and then once that 10 minutes has gone by, I will add this 10 pounds of pressure, which will cause it to start building pressure here. And once we bring it up to 10 pounds of pressure, then we start the timer, which for raw packed chicken breast with no bones, it is 75 minutes. So this has been going as a steady steam like this. I set the timer for 10 minutes and there's 1 minute left, and it says you have to do 7 to 10 minutes. So it's ready anytime. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on. I'll put a little mark on it because I have 10 pounds of pressure that I want for my elevation in Florida. Put that on, and this will start to rise, and it will go to 10. Usually really it goes to like 11, and then once it gets there at 10, then I will set the timer for 75 minutes, which is an hour and 15 minutes, and I will turn my dial here down a little bit so that it doesn't keep rising. We want it to stay steady at that 10. So I probably won't film any while it's canning because that's boring, and I'll just film when we're ready to take it out, take the jars out. This has come down to 0, so we take the weight off. And you hear it's got a little bit of venting left to do. So when you don't hear that anymore, we can take these off, opposites, just like they were put on. And then open it away from you so the steam does not go in your face. And then we leave it like this for 10 minutes. Okay, it's been 10 minutes, so the pressure has equalized, and now we're gonna pull the chicken out of the jars. We're not gonna pull it out of the jars, we're gonna pull it out of the canner. So we have 19 jars of chicken ready to eat. This is the curry chicken. I did 2 of those and I did 4 with the herbs in it.